Hello, I'm Olivia McCoy. I'm a student at UCLA, and I'm participating in an internship program here at the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C. I conduct research on threats to U.S. national security. I've grown up in a world where most Americans enjoy the security provided by our national defense. But we don't really think of the world in terms of enemies because we don't hold any real animosity towards other nations or groups of people. The Cold War was over before we were born. If you ask someone my age, why would anyone be our enemy? Or why do terrorists attack us? The only answer you're really going to hear is something like, it's George Bush's fault. For serious students like myself, that explanation is overly simplistic and quite patronizing. We want to know the real reason why foreign governments, terrorists, and criminal organizations view the United States as an enemy. In order to find a sufficient answer, analysts need to deeply understand things about their history, culture, language, and ideology. U.S. foreign policy is often the excuse for hostile states to justify aggression, but it doesn't sufficiently explain any of the driving factors. What do hostile states and actors believe about themselves, the United States, and the world that motivates them to promote anti-U.S. propaganda, conduct major espionage operations, and acts of aggression and war towards the United States and its allies? In other words, why would they lie about us, spy on us, and attack us? For some insight on these questions, we asked the Senior Fellow for Information Operations here at the Center for Security Policy, Dr. Michael Waller, what is an enemy threat doctrine?
An enemy threat doctrine is a belief system of others who want to threaten us. Pure and simple. It's what motivates them deep in their core beliefs that will tell us through their words and actions what they really intend to do to us. It's not simply a diversity of different opinions. It's actually a belief system that gets people to want to kill us. So we should all be concerned. Well, first, you're looking at intent. Each one of us has the capability to do terrible things to people. Just think of, we have the power to kill people. We have the power to torture people. We have the power to make lives miserable for people. But most of us don't have the intent to do that. It's those people who have the intent to use those capabilities who are the danger. Especially those who have a belief system that's rooted in the idea that they must do these terrible things because that's what their belief system propels them to do. Those are the dangers. Well, the Russians have a threat doctrine of their own that Vladimir Putin is reviving, which the Russian people don't really have a threat doctrine. They just love their country and they have their own certain way of showing it. But their leadership does have a threat doctrine. They think that Russia should be supreme around the world, and to do that, the United States has to be weakened worldwide, and we have to live under constant threat of nuclear annihilation. The Chinese military and the ruling party in China have a threat doctrine also, where they believe that their system should reign supreme over the whole world, not simply coexist with everybody, but to conquer their neighbors and to threaten us. And part of the threat doctrine includes looking at things 100 years out from now or even more. They plan ahead very far, unlike us who, Americans, we really only plan a couple of years ahead if we even plan. China has a very long-term strategy to threaten the United States and to weaken us as not just a world power, but as a country. Well, Adolf Hitler had a threat doctrine where if you think of it from German eyes as a defeated great country after World War I, it's understandable if you can kind of get into their heads. He was thinking the whole world is picking on us German people. It's the British and it's the communists and it's the Jews, and they were the ones responsible for destroying us. So let's create a new Germany under National Socialism that will defend Germans everywhere. And that meant what? That meant if you're not German living in the German Empire, or the remains of the German Empire, you were in big trouble. So they would pick on certain minorities and say, those minorities are to blame. And so they would turn the angst and anguish and the malaise of a defeated population into an aggression against certain cultural groups and ethnic groups, both, they say, the Jews at home and other minorities, but also all Jews everywhere, and then all non-Germans everywhere, ultimately. And that's precisely what they did when they wanted more living space, Lebensraum, for the German people. Hey, we just need more room for us. There are too many Germans inside Germany. Let's expand. Well, what do you do with the people in those areas that you're expanding into? You have to exterminate them. That was part of Hitler's threat doctrine. Well, Iran has a threat, the Islamic Republic of Iran has a threat doctrine put forth by Ayatollah Khomeini back in the late 1970s, and they've tried to live up to it. They sum it up for us, and they even take the trouble of putting it into English. 3 words: death to America. So their threat doctrine is one where their country will be ruled under their form of Shia Islam, but that the United States as a country must be destroyed. They view the United States as the great Satan. Now think, for a very religious person, Satan is the worst of all evils. And you're in a cosmic, permanent war against Satan. So if the United States is the great Satan on earth, then it's the obligation of everyone subscribing to that threat doctrine to fight tooth and nail to destroy Satan here on earth. And that's the United States. The Cuban people are a victim only because we haven't stood by them. We tried, under President Kennedy, to oust the communist regime that was taking root in Cuba and failed. Since then, the United States tried, under both Democrat and Republican presidents, to isolate the regime, to weaken it. But now we have a wonderful opportunity where if this President Obama has chosen to open up to Cuba, he should have a quid pro quo. We'll open up with you if you free your dissidents, if you stop persecuting people, if you stop harboring terrorists, if you stop harboring drug smugglers, if you stop providing a space for Russian nuclear bombers to land. They fly from Murmansk over the Arctic down the east coast of the United States with nuclear weapons right off our coast. President Obama hasn't done anything like that. President Obama has not discussed the Cuban government's threat doctrine, which is very well pronounced and well defined. He's just saying, we're going to open up to you guys, no questions asked. And that's why he is siding with the Cuban regime and not the Cuban people. North Korea is a threat because it's a personal dictatorship where the leader of the country takes his relatives who are generals and has them executed by mortars and other odd forms of murder. So he's using murder as a tool to keep power, like his father did, like his grandfather did. But North Korea's threat doctrine is inherent in all its symbolism. It has Marx, it has Lenin. That is internationalization of a revolution that calls for exterminating entire classes of people. The regime itself is such a militaristic regime that everyone in official capacity wears a uniform. They don't have any checks and balances. Everything's up to the whim of this crazy guy, Kim Jong-un, who's running the country. And he's working with the Iranian regime, he's working with the Russians, he's working with others to build entire nuclear weapons systems and to proliferate them around the world to bring forth his threat doctrine, which is mainly destroy the United States. So there are groups out there that have threat doctrines who use a lot of unwitting people to do their work for them. You'll have individuals and organizations and even foreign governments who are supporting people here in the United States with money, with organizations, with trips, with training. And these people don't have any idea that they're working for anyone who has a threat doctrine that's hostile to us, that seeks to destroy us. They just don't like how our government is. They want to change the political leadership involved or do something that's part of normal American political activity. But these foreign groups come in and they set up front organizations on college campuses and elsewhere and use people who really don't understand what they're doing as their spokespersons, so that when someone comes out and criticizes them who knows about threat doctrine, these people come back and say, oh, you're just a hater, you're just a bigot, you're just an Islamophobe, or whatever else. But when you have groups, let's say Islamic groups on college campuses, you have folks who, they don't have a threat doctrine, they just believe in Islam. That's their religion, that's their thing. But when they're organized by a group that has a totalitarian, murderous ideology, like the Muslim Brotherhood, setting up front groups on college campuses, like the Muslim Students Association, MSA. Most MSA members on American campuses don't know that it's controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood. They don't even believe in the Muslim Brotherhood. And if the Muslim Brotherhood took power, they'd be among the first to be killed, as we've seen in places like Egypt. So these hostile foreign forces with threat doctrines are working through well-meaning Americans to get their points across and to divide us against each other instead of allow us to unite against the threat.